Hi, everyone. So, we're kicking off day one of the Identifying the Orphan Spirit event, and I'm really curious to know how many of you have actually ever heard of the Orphan Spirit before. So, feel free to comment below if this is a new concept to you or if it's something you are familiar with. So, for me, the concept was a new one when I first heard about it several years ago. And since then, I've been really intrigued with the actions and the attitudes of the orphan spirit, so I've done a lot of studying about it. And as I've studied, the more convicted I have been in my own life, and I found that there's so much freedom as I begin to identify what the orphan spirit looks like and how it manifests itself in your life, and recognizing like I'm acting the way I am right now because of the orphan spirit, and so I want to get rid of that more and more on a regular basis. So if you took the time to read the prelude and chapter 1 of All the King's Orphans, you'll have read the allegory of the little girl named Tia. She was taken into the home of a king, and he had given her access. He adopted her, so he gave her access to all that he had. But in the story, you'll read that she really struggled to feel as though she belonged. And so, I guess to get started, my question would be, were you able to identify with Tia at all? Like, have you ever had that feeling of being alone, of being afraid, of being unloved, of being unwanted? Do you convince yourself that that you don't belong? Do you feel jealous of other people? You feel uncertain, unsure? I know that we can all experience those feelings from time to time and in different areas of our life. Obviously, I am most compelled to get this message to the church because it's so prevalent inside the body of Christ, and it affects how we treat our brothers and sisters. So, because we are all like Tia in some ways, especially after we have been brought into the kingdom. You know, we've been adopted. You can read about adoption in the Bible in several different places. One of my favorite places is in Ephesians 1. So if you get a chance, make sure that you go there and read it. And if you get the study guide, there's also a whole list of different verses in the Bible where you can go and highlight it and read it yourself so that you can remember that you have been adopted and you've been welcomed into the family of God. So adoption is a beautiful process. It's the process of being brought into a family. We're all familiar with how that works. You're given a home, you're given security and identity, you have a name change. You now have provision. You become an equal heir with your brothers and sisters, and the list goes on and on. So that illustration is one that we can use when learning to understand how we belong in the body of Christ. So the king is offering this to this little Tia, but for some different reasons, she refused to believe that she could accept this gift. She felt jealous of the other kids in the kingdom. You'll read about that. She saw kids enjoying all the good things around her, and rather than going and joining in and experiencing these good things, she sat there angry at them and felt even more convinced that she didn't belong there. She felt alone because she refused to leave her place near the door, and she felt unloved because she couldn't open her heart to accept the love that was being offered to her by her father, the king, and by the rest of the brothers and sisters. If you've ever felt like this, like Tia did, I want you to ask yourself if you still feel this way. And then if so, if you say, yes, I do still feel that way from time to time, I want you to ask yourself how it affects your daily life. How is it affecting you right now? How is it affecting you today? Tia refused to let go of her past. Remember, she kept those boxes really close to her near the door? That contained all her past, and she thought she had to keep that with her. What are you hanging on to that is in your past? And imagine like if Tia had agreed with the king and gotten rid of those boxes and said, where do you want to take me? Where do we want to go? What are we going to look at? And she could have ran free and so happy throughout the kingdom, but instead she stayed put and she hung on to those boxes that held her past. So think about that for your own life. Is this something that you need to do in your own life, getting rid of some boxes, some pain from the past? And you might say, is that even possible to get rid of it? And it is possible. There is a liar, the devil, who wants you to believe that it's not possible. And I want you to know it is possible to do that, because God is the great Redeemer, and He is the healer, and He will help you work through those steps. And we're going to be looking at that through the next 2 weeks as well. So in chapter 1, we talked about the life of Moses. We read about that a bit, and I love the illustrations that come from the Exodus of the Israelites leaving slavery. We can learn so much from that about how our mindset needs to be changed as we leave slavery and work towards freedom. The study guide, it asks these questions. It says, what might Moses have gained by being raised as a prince rather than a slave? Because he was adopted. He was taken into the home of a king, just like what we're talking about. He was raised as a prince, and that changed his mindset. How do you think it affected his mindset? And how did this play a role into his calling when he was called by God to lead the slaves out of Egypt? So with those questions in mind, ask yourself if you are living with the mentality of a slave, or are you living with the mentality of royalty? Do you recognize that you are a son or daughter of the king? Are you a slave to your past? Are you a slave to generational sins? Are you living with the victim mentality? And it's something that you have to be honest with yourself about. You have to really be honest with yourself, because it's so hard to recognize it in ourselves, because we want to blame other people. We want to blame circumstances as to why things are the way that they are. So freedom starts when you begin to first acknowledge that there are chains wrapped around you. If you don't recognize the chains, you're going to stay comfortable right there where you sit, and allow them to hold you captive. So ask God to show you if you've been living in bondage inside the kingdom, and ask Him to open your eyes to any areas where you've been believing the lies of the enemy. And then ask your Abba Father, the King, to begin showing you what it looks like to live as a son or daughter. After that, take time to read chapter 2 in both the book, All the King's Orphans, and in the study guide as well. We'll talk to you tomorrow.